I don't think Trump is such a naive person to believe that Putin wants peace. Some people like to carve little wooden figures, and this one likes to make peace between countries. Biden could have prevented this war. What does winning mean to Putin? Trump is doing all this because he wants the Nobel Prize. It's about the same kind of nonsense. The point is, it's not his war, it's on another continent. We have a lot to handle here in America, especially with people who studied at American and European universities and are the most brainwashed. That's why threatening with tomahawks is better than giving them. The only thing that can end this war is this. Yes, we organized the Maidan, and I apologize for that. Our whole task is to bring common sense back to both sides.
Leon Weinstein, political scientist and public figure, is on the line with us. Welcome, Leon.
Good afternoon, Vasily. Thank you. I'm always happy to be on your channel. I don't think you can draw such a direct line from tomahawks to a faster war. Let me try to outline what I suspect is in the minds of our government, not just Trump, but also his advisors. Because always, in 99% of cases, what we hear is the result of some discussion and conclusions made by a group. Let's call them experts. So the thing is, a raised hammer that's about to hit you is always much scarier than when the blow has already happened. That's why the prospect of sending something there, whether it's barking here or not, I don't know, whatever helps. To hit more and more Russians and reach Russians deep inside Russia, not just at the front. Theoretically, it works better than what has already been sent, and something else. That's it. I've sent it. Can you do anything else? So that's the first thing. Second, I don't think Trump was ever such a naive person. He's never shown himself to be naive. Someone who believes that Putin wants peace. That's just nonsense, like saying Trump is doing all this because he wants a Nobel Prize. It's about the same kind of nonsense. The thing is, let's just analyze Putin's part, because without that, it's clear we probably won't be able to do anything. He has his own limitations, fears, and problems. I understand that we don't really care about his problems, but without understanding these problems, we won't understand how to achieve this peace. So Putin is in a position where he has ruined things. Well, that's already about 4 years of the country's life, which basically hasn't developed, which has been living under what you might call wartime laws. Well, except for St. Petersburg and Moscow, where this war isn't noticeable. But nevertheless, about 1 million people have been killed. Trump says 1.5 million. I don't know. He likes to exaggerate. When he's told it's from 500,000 to 1.5 million, he says 1.5. That's the right tactic during any negotiations, but still we don't know. A fairly large number have been killed. Part of the population is very unhappy that there's a war going on and there are sanctions, that they can't go to France for vacation or do certain things like that, something like Roquefort cheese. Some people simply believe that the war with Ukraine is wrong. Society isn't very unified on this issue. Recently, there have been some youth riots about it. In St. Petersburg yesterday or the day before, 200, 300 people gathered and sang songs that were, I would say, offensive to Putin. So there are certain sentiments, but what's the problem? Putin can't say right now. We're all folding up and leaving. He needs to say, we won, we achieved the goals that were set for us. Before the start of this, he doesn't say the word war, he says special military operation, but it's the same thing. Everyone understands. Now, in order to say that, you have to actually have them. Today, there are so many bloggers and so many podcasts and so on that if he just lies, everyone will know that he's just lying. So he needs to win. What does it mean to win from Putin's point of view? It's either to seize or to get everything that he put into the constitution of the Russian Federation. That means 4 regions, plus Crimea, plus recognition by some part of the West, maybe just the United States, or perhaps a broader Western recognition that these are the territories he controls. He might even be satisfied if, even if we don't recognize their inclusion into the Russian Federation, we acknowledge that, like with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics North and South Korea, these are separate territories. He would be fine with that. So he needs to seize these regions either by military means or through diplomacy. Now, without this, he can't get the soldiers back at all. Now, there's another problem. The return of the soldiers. I don't know how many of them are there right now, but let's say when the Afghans returned from Afghanistan, there were far fewer of them, and a whole subclass of bandits emerged who were called Afghans. They came back with weapons, with blood on their hands, with a completely cold-blooded attitude toward killing, torture, and everything else, and they flooded Russia. This happened every time the army came back, so to speak, came back and they had weapons. Stalin tried to suppress it with concentration camps and so on and so forth. Putin lacks the power Stalin once had. I mean that aggressive apparatus of oppression. The aggressive apparatus of oppression. I mean, it exists, but it's not as, so to speak, developed. It's not to that extent. Until today, the sole owner, the only owner, and the only commander of Russia. So without bringing home a victory, Putin can't end this war. The only thing that can end this war is this kind of a huge stick that, if he doesn't end the war, will hit him, and tomahawks. This is not the huge stick that will outweigh all the problems and fears that will arise if he brings the soldiers back without completing the objectives of this very operation. So, all the talks with Putin so far have either not. Ukraine did not agree to give up these 4 regions, and, so to speak, to build a wall or draw a line around what Russia has already recognized as Russian, meaning it has decided that this is Russian, or until, that is, Putin conquers these regions. No matter if talks with Putin last 2 hours, 16 hours, 144 hours, or just 10 minutes, the result will be the same. He will simply say at the end of the conversation, "We will seize, we must get these regions, period." That's why what Trump will talk about with Zelensky today, or is already talking about now, what else he can convey besides Putin's position, I don't understand yet. I think Trump just hasn't come up with that big carrot or incentive yet. Or as it's called in Russian, that can be given to Putin, to Russia, and so on, to outweigh this fear of unrest, coups, riots, hatred, and, in a sense, overthrowing authorities. Uprisings are rare in Russia, but when they occur, they're extremely bloody. That's Senka Razin, Pugachev, Batkamakno, and others. So I think that all this talk right now, will come to nothing. Although Trump is, without a doubt, an incredibly talented person, and God knows we don't know what else he has up his sleeve. I don't think Trump believes that he should give up what Russia hasn't captured. But the thing is, as I understand it, if I understand correctly, I could be wrong, the Ukrainian side, they don't want to. And the separation along the line where, so to speak, the sides have captured territory today. Yes, they're approximately along that line. You can straighten it out a bit, a little this way, a little that way, but so to speak, that's where it's drawn. As they say, what they've captured is what they control. I think there's an attempt to put pressure on Putin, an attempt to persuade him not to want or try to capture more. And there's pressure being put on Ukraine. Guys, you won't be able to drive Russia out of these regions on your own. So calm down and let's try to make the separation happen along the line where things stand now. How seriously does holding talks at the White House today without Putin undermine Russia's position? I'm not sure what it means to meet there as a group of 3, 4, 8, or more. You know, under British law, which has been adopted in America, there is such a concept when it's neither arbitration nor a court. And that's what we call mediation. I don't even know what it's called in Russian. Mediation. I don't know what that means. It means that two people, two organizations, or two representatives sit in two rooms, and the person who handles this tries to reconcile them or tries to solve the problem. Here's the process. He visits one, talks, then the other, talks, and repeats. I don't know how many times he goes back and forth, maybe 2, 18, or 34. I participated in this mediation 2 or 3 times in total. I was sitting in the room. The people we were with as a company, though I wasn't personally involved in the lawsuit, were in another room. And in this way, so to speak, this very person was shuttling back and forth until he came to the conclusion that the positions were close enough and the emotions had calmed down enough that everyone could finally get together and talk, so to speak, to express the very latest ideas and so on and try to bring them to a decision. That's what Trump is doing, and I don't understand why they keep writing about it in Ukraine, but not in Russia. But why? He met one-on-one, but really, why? Whose business is it? Who cares whom the President of the United States meets with? If he wants to, he meets. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't meet. But no one's signing for Ukraine, right? Nothing. Ukraine. The final deal, Ukraine will decide whether it wants to accept a part of it or not. And for now, so to speak, the person in the middle, in this case Trump, put himself there. I don't really understand, by the way, why, but he did. So actually, this isn't his war, not his war at all. It's not even about whether it started during his time or not. He didn't start it. He wasn't the one who started it. Because it's not his war, it's happening on some other continent. We have plenty of things to do here inside America. Yes, he just loves people. He believes that we need to find ways to solve problems without hitting each other over the head with a rock or a missile. Well, that's what he thinks, and by the way, I think so too. I mean, why interfere? But he does interfere. He brokered peace between Pakistan and India, Armenia and the Armenians, and is now working on peace between Jews and Arabs. Well, that's his hobby. Some people like carving little wooden figures, and he likes making peace between countries. Okay, so because of this hobby, he put himself there. And we don't gain anything from this. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. These rare earth metals, well, they have them in Brazil, in Argentina, in Greenland, and elsewhere too. It might take much longer to mine them in this military or semi-military situation in Ukraine than to mine them in Greenland. Well, so I don't know anything about that. There's no wheat that we need. We have plenty of our own wheat. We sell it. There's no oil. We have plenty of our own oil. We sell it. So there's nothing in Ukraine that interests us, so why did we get involved there? Yet we're still very active there, so Ukrainians constantly attack us. Bloggers, journalists, citizens, and politicians were acting to stop the war on their side. Yeah, so, well, in that sense, you guys have it. It's long overdue to say, sort it out yourselves. It's really not our business. However, I feel responsible for the fact that this bastard Biden started it, and Biden could have easily prevented this war. For some reason, not only did he allow it, in my opinion, but he also wanted it for some reason, was pushing for it for some purpose, so in a sense. And of course, what we did, the Maidan, for which I apologize to you, yes. We spent quite a lot of money and quite a lot of effort and turned all of Ukraine upside down. All of Ukraine began to believe it was their own wish to oust Yanukovych and change the country's direction. Well, it cost us about $5 billion, for which I feel the same. Even though those people aren't connected to us, they're still from my country. And so, in this sense, maybe we feeling guilty for these two things. We are trying, so to speak, to stop the killing of Ukrainian youth, of whom I think 500,000 have already died. We are trying to stop it, despite Ukraine's complete unwillingness to stop this killing themselves. For Ukraine, preserving every meter of land matters more than saving their young men's lives. And so our whole task is to bring back, so to speak, real common sense. To bring back meaning to both sides. One side, you won't be able to seize more than what you've already taken, and the other side, you won't be able to liberate what has already been seized. And just settle down with that, settle down. Try to live so that in 20 years, this will start to fade from memory, and you would once again become, so to speak, neighbors, brotherly peoples, with relatives or someone else. In my class in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, out of 30 students, 4 had Ukrainian last names. There may have been more, but I recall 4 Ukrainian surnames. Well, that is, so there are a huge number of Ukrainians in Russia, a huge number of Russians in Ukraine. Well, Russians were also relocated there, as I understand it, by force, so to speak. First, they caused the Holodomor. About 8 million people died there, in Ukraine and the Soviet Union, and then they started relocating Russian people there, so to speak. I understand this was the central government's policy at the time, set by the Georgian leader A. Djugashvili I. But those times are over, they're finished and gone. I don't remember them, but I do recall uprisings during the Soviet Union, with tanks surrounding and firing on cities. When I was 6, I happened to be driving with my parents, and we passed this. We were held until they shot everyone by the trees, then they told us we could go. So we drove past what the tanks had done there. What was the name of that city? I forgot now, that's it. We were driving from St. Petersburg, I think, through Moscow to the south, to Crimea. Or maybe not to Crimea, maybe to the Caucasus. I was 6 and don't remember, so that's how it ended. We've forgotten it. Nothing can be done. That's all I can say. There, Khmelnytsky cut open the bellies of pregnant Jewish women. So should I hate all Ukrainians for that? I understand there is anti-Semitism among these people, and among Jews there is Semitism toward others. You can't avoid that, so what can you do? You have to live in today's real world. Finland gave up a third or a quarter of its land, Karelia. I lived on the Karelian Isthmus, which Finland lost, but it kept the rest. That's the decision of each nation. They could have fought to the end and possibly stopped the Russians, or Russia might have taken all of Finland, erasing it. Finland is now independent and part of NATO. So that's why I don't know what's best for everyone, but from Trump's point of view, it's better to stop fighting. None, 0. The thing is, there are 2 ways to resolve conflicts. One is with a stone, a hammer, a bullet, and so on, and the other is by some other means. Here is your humble servant, just like Trump, long before I even knew who he was. Trump believed that one of the biggest problems that exist in our civilization, which, as we know, has existed for about 6,000 years, is we don't know what happened back then. The Bible is the oldest book we have, giving us an idea of events from 6,000 years ago. So, our civilization for almost these 6,000 years has always resolved all its conflicts in the same way. First with stones, then with arrows, then with spears, then with swords, then with cannons. And our science, what we call science, the physical sciences, have advanced very far ahead. And today, instead of, well, I don't know, to defeat 10 people with a sword, you have to be a very serious fighter. After all, those 10 people are resisting you. That's a whole day's work, and then you need to rest for at least a night. Now you just call, someone presses a button, another does too, and something takes off. And boom, and there's no more Nagasaki or Budapest or Amsterdam or something else. And you can even just do it between the first and the second, or press that finger between drags of a cigarette. That's why our physical sciences have advanced very far, while our social, so-called sciences, i.e., skills, psychological, call it whatever you want. There's a name that you won't understand, not because you can't understand it. It's called volitional science, that is. The science of beings that possess free will. But this is generally an undeveloped and unknown thing outside the English-speaking world. So our volitional sciences are not developed. They are at the level of a caveman. Offended by you, I hit you with a stone. Head. As long as the stone was an arrow, spear, sword, or cannonball, it was fine. But once it became... We won't learn to solve our problems in any other way. If this isn't removed from our psychology... Oh, so then I'll go and hit you with a stone now. You offended me with words, so now I'll hurt you by killing all your relatives. If we don't remove this from our collective psyche, it's impossible to get rid of it from the individual one, but at least from the collective. Then one day we'll press that button and Amsterdam will blow up, And along with it, everything else will, so to speak, come crashing down to earth, so to speak. In Nagasaki, things were falling within a 15-kilometer radius, but with Amsterdam, it'll be falling within 3,000 kilometers, and will destroy each other. That's why Trump's idea is not to escalate the war by sending tomahawks, because that just continues the war, escalates the war. Sending tomahawks won't make Russia stop fighting. We've already talked about what Putin's problem is and so on. And if we don't send tomahawks, well, it'll just be hanging over Putin, over his head, that they might send them. And then, so to speak, things might start blowing up somewhere closer in Saratov or in Ryazan or near Moscow. And then his situation will be such that it's quite possible there will be a palace coup and he'll be removed. A coup will remove him. That's why it's better to threaten with tomahawks than to actually give them. I understand Ukraine would naturally want them. They say that about everyone. Any side says that about the other side, he says. He's so clueless he only understands getting punched in the face. That's what starting a war is. I just said that and thought about how many outraged comments there will be calling me an idiot, saying I sold out to Putin and mentioning my nationality. I fully understand that there will be hundreds of them, but just so everyone knows, I can only respond and say what I think. And if I don't think something, I won't talk about it. From the moment Trump first spoke about this war, actually about 4 months before he was elected, maybe 6, I don't remember a single moment when he hesitated one way or the other. What you're saying is an absolute and surprising revelation to me. So it's not you personally, but the world perceives what Trump does as some kind of wavering. Strange, why? Well, it's just that a person, I don't know, that's how it turned out. I've taken part in quite a lot of, let's say, high-level negotiations, starting from talks with employees of my company who wanted a salary increase, changes to some rules and so on, up to negotiations between cities. I organized sister city relations between Leningrad, back when it was still called Leningrad, and Los Angeles and later St. Petersburg. Even up to negotiations at, let's say, the governmental level. That's right, you always try to look at things from different angles, especially if they drag on. Not just negotiations where everyone sits down and today, tomorrow, they have to make a decision, and the day after tomorrow, they're obligated to sign everything. That has happened too. We have to come to an agreement. Whatever we agree on, we have to agree, but it's an obligation. Here, when you have time, you naturally try different tactics, sometimes threatening, sometimes flattering. You never argue with the person, you never call him a murderer, a bloody dwarf, or anything like that. Because that adds negativity, and the person loses the desire, even if he doesn't realize it, to negotiate with you. And when it's not personal, at least it removes some of the emotion. Donald Trump hasn't changed his opinion even once during all this time. He believes that this war needs to be stopped. I've said this on your show before, but I'll say it again. He really doesn't care where the dividing line will be. The key point is both sides agree this is the line. You're on one side, I'm on the other, and we stop shooting at each other. And Trump is just trying to convince both sides of this in different ways. I have to tell you that from our point of view, Ukraine is just as uncooperative as Russia. So I understand that from Russia, looking at you, it seems like here we are fighting fascism, and they've convinced them of that, and so on, right? And you've been convinced that the bloody dwarf, everything he wants, that's what he wants. So he has no ideas or thoughts, no NATO, no greed. He just wants to seize Ukraine because he's crazy. Or something like that. Well, that's it. So each side is convinced of something that isn't true, and now they're fighting windmills instead of the real enemy. I'm not saying for a second that Russia isn't at fault for something. They killed a huge number of people. They destroyed lives. They ruined destinies. They forced about 10 million Ukrainians to leave. People were forced to go. Destinies are being broken, lives are being shattered, and so on. I am fully aware of that. I'm just saying psychologically, both sides, not the leadership, I can't speak for them, but The country, the population, they are charged up with propaganda. Propaganda that has been instilled in them, and they can't have a normal conversation. Just like how Arabs can't calmly relate to Israelis and understand that Israelis also want to live in this world alive, not dead. But they've been charged up with propaganda that says these people are monsters, that they're horrible, that they have horns, that when they come, they'll start drinking the blood of Muslim babies and mixing it into matzo. Well, how can you negotiate with them if they mix the blood of our babies into their food in their sleep? That's why as long as this continues, the war will go on both here and there. Well, yes, of course, it's always been like that. In the modern era, it was kind of started by Goebbels. He came to America, started studying advertising and marketing in the film industry, and got his hands on some amazing textbooks. As a talented person, he said, "My God, you can fool people about anything this way, can't you?" He liked this, then he liked the idea of so-called eugenics, which was being demonstrated here. The Democratic Party decided to get rid of black people through abortions and so on. The Democratic Party is a very interesting organization here. He went to Germany with two ideas. The first is, look, how a big lie repeated many times becomes the truth in people's minds. And the second is, let's start destroying. Let's invent the struggle of Aryans against non-Aryans and unite our people around this idea. Non-Aryans are drinking our water, our blood, and that's why we live poorly. That's a typical socialist idea. We suffer because someone inside or outside is draining us. And he is kind of a father transferred from the practice of film propaganda to global military revolutionary propaganda and so on. So he is the father of what today is called brainwashing. And Russia picked this up and developed it further. Their brainwashing is much more advanced than it was in the Soviet Union. I'm a specialist, maybe not in brainwashing, but definitely in propaganda. I know a bit about this. Actually, not just a bit, I'd say I know a lot about it. And they, of course, are incredibly effective. But I have to tell you right away, in Ukraine, American specialists or their own young and smart people are doing exactly the same things in exactly the same way. Well, I think the question is broader, and the so-called white race, or sometimes it's called the Judeo-Christian civilization and so on. Some time ago, like any other civilization, it started down this path. I'm going to say a word now that people might not really understand what I mean. Suicide, that is, down the path of self-destruction. For some reason, it seems all empires, countries, and similar cultures end up the same way. At some point, for some reason, they began to fall apart. And they mostly start to fall apart not because an enemy is attacking them, but because something is happening inside them. This process of self-destruction or suicide is occurring. Otherwise, we'd still have empires like the Babylonian or Roman and so on. Egypt, which lasted for, 1,000 years, but for some reason suddenly begins to collapse again, not because there is a competitor attacking. Although later, physically, when the state weakens, becomes rotten and so on, someone comes and, so to speak, begins to take advantage of the fruits of that civilization. Because why do some people attack others solely to, so to speak, take something that they have and we don't? Sometimes it's physical buildings, jewelry, and something else. And sometimes it's simply the opportunity to exploit and collect tribute from a larger number of able-bodied people. So, for some reason, somewhere around the border of the 90s and the early 2000s, it began. Perhaps the process had been happening for a while, but it became clear. This is known as decay. And now, so there's an attempt. The current administration, or rather, an attempt. What happened? The answer to that was that working people, those who actually worked, not the ones who went to universities and got an education, so to speak, had their brains washed. The most brainwashed are those who attended American and European universities. The longer you went there, the less capable your mind became of perceiving anything new or different, as they say. Some people worked without knowing why. What was happening just happened, and their response was trauma. That's why trauma became so appealing to everyone. There were 16 people on stage in 2015 for the Republicans, and no one even came close to thinking that some businessman, who was just playing around. His name was well known. He had a famous television show. Well, someone with 4 or 5 or maybe 8 wives, who knows? Nobody really knew for sure. He suddenly ran and everyone assumed he wanted publicity. Exactly. But as soon as he started speaking to the people, to those very people they call rednecks, they're often dismissed, but they're the ones who truly create value by making things. And these people suddenly realize that this man who expresses their thoughts, they don't want that. I won't list the 20 things they didn't want. And Trump in this way gained wild popularity, surpassing all those 16 or 15 people, one of whom was supposed to become president. They were like Komsomol leaders there, but in reality, well, so to speak, they were called senators or governors or something else. That's Trump. It's an act of resistance, a counter-revolution if the previous event was a revolution, or a counter-coup if it was a coup. And today, Trump is doing something different. He's cleaning things up. Like Tolstoy, a flabby body with a huge amount of unnecessary fat, right? It can't move. His mind is a mess, his hair is tangled, and so on. In order to start fighting again, you first need to get rid of your own unnecessary fat. What we're doing right now is getting rid of that junk, those deceptions, those lies that come out of us every single day. Because more and more documents are being found by the FBI and the Department of Justice, and more documents by the State Department about what these people were doing, like at the last Bacchanalia in Peru when they were trying to grab something for themselves, their buddies, or something else at our expense. Those people who go to work, produce something, and then pay some absolutely insane taxes that no one knows where they go or why. And then it's unclear how they just disappear. 6 disappeared in just the Pentagon. I might get confused now, but over 50 years, $6 trillion, they can't account for them. The Pentagon doesn't know where they are. They just don't know, that's it, period. Well, how can that be? Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah, of course, it seems so. But look, I'll explain to you now what the problem is. So laws, any laws that the United States of America makes, whether it's about age limits or something else, about terms, it's a law. So laws. They are enacted in such a way that first the Congress, the lower house, passes them, then the Congress, the upper house, and then the president signs them. And that's when it was necessary to set limits. After Franklin Delano Roosevelt served 4 terms, he died during his 4th term, if I'm not mistaken. Well, he definitely served 3, and I think he died during his 4th, after being re-elected. So after that, they decided that the president's term should be limited to 2 terms. Yes, each for 4 years. And since it didn't affect them, both the lower house and the upper house happily signed it. It landed on the president's desk, and he had no choice but to sign it because everyone was pointing fingers at him. If he hadn't signed it, he would have been blamed. Now, what happens with term limits? We're not even talking about age. After all, you can be sharp, quick, and smart in your 70s, and in your 20s you can be a complete fool, slow, and unreasonable. But a limit of 2 terms, let's say, of 4 years or 5 years each. I don't remember exactly how it's distributed differently in Congress. It's all different there, but let's say 2 terms, period. They have to vote for it themselves, and they've already done it for the 30th time. A movement begins to stop them from voting, but then it quickly fades away. These people have to vote themselves that their whole life consists of what they've made up. There are enough intrigues, enough people have been bribed, enough wealthy people or unions have been honored, deals have been made, they've been put forward, pushed through, dragged along, and they've become a senator or a congressman. From then on, his life is secure. That's it. The only thing is, he can move from senator to governor, from governor to senator, from congressman to governor, and so on. That's a different story. But if he falls out of that, then that's it. Life practically ends. They choose the whole meaning of their lives. That is, they have to vote now to kill themselves, to shoot themselves in the foot. They won't do that. They won't. And so, I don't know what to come up with, but obviously some kind of public poll, which still won't be mandatory. And security and personal motives, absolutely. If they did to me what they did to Trump and his family, then, as they say, the ashes of my class would burn and beat in my heart, as Till Eulenspiegel said. And I'm very glad that it does, because those 4 years during the nightmare period of our country's administration, supposedly by Biden, were full of depravity, complete disregard for the Constitution, the law, and so on. Meanwhile, there was howling and attempts. A person who, as it turned out after all these trials, was not guilty of anything at all, except for the fact that he's sarcastic, sharp, can say something, maybe make an unsuccessful joke. Just like I sometimes make bad jokes too, at least according to my wife. She thinks that I often make bad jokes. That's it. So all those people who howled, who jeered, who organized all this, are they still around? You can't just let that slide. Yes, no, of course not. We would all rise up. All the conservatives, including yours truly, would be up in arms. And when, for some reason, the Trump administration decided to cover up the whole Epstein case, we were up in arms. They were basically forced, and we would have been even more upset. But when these people did exactly what they tried to accuse Trump of, and then it turned out to be a lie, but they actually did it, they should pay for that. Well, there is no trust in the government as such. For example, Congress's approval rating is now 23%. I'm also surprised that there are actually 23% of idiots who trust Congress. Where do they come from? Maybe they're the families of Congress members. It's roughly like that, but that's a common story. From 45 to 52-53, those are normal fluctuations. Because here it's not even about trust, but rather approval of the activity. Let's say it's a slightly different angle, and there are people who think, yes, this is good, but I don't like something else, so you say, no, I'm not there, no. But when it's around 50% for an incumbent president, that's quite solid, as we say. I think that Russia is doing this much more successfully, because any of the leaders and residents of the countries that are under the influence of Russia can clearly see what happened with Georgia, what is happening in Ukraine, what happened with Moldova, and so on. That is, any of them would like to distance themselves from that influence. So just as the NATO leadership said that 2 people did about the same to revive NATO again, one is Trump, the other Putin. So I think they were absolutely right, because Putin became a threat. People were relaxed. Yeah, where would he attack us? And now, in general, people think there's a real danger that this lunatic, in order to stay in power, might decide to attack NATO. For example, yes, or not attack with tanks, but start causing trouble. In Latvia, where supposedly there are many Russian-speaking and Russian people, some unrest happens, an attempt to change the government, and then a new government comes in and says, we don't want to be in NATO anymore, we want to be friends with Russia again, and then Russian tanks roll in. Well, they'll try. That's what they call invoking Article 5 of the NATO Treaty about defending NATO members, when all of this is happening from within. That's why everyone understands this, and Putin has revived NATO. He actually strengthened it by doing this. They all started spending much more on their own armaments than before Trump. That was the task and the clear, obvious goal. For over 40 years, we protected all the NATO countries, and because of that, they allowed themselves not to spend money on defense, but to spend money on social programs. And they said about us, how heartless you are. You don't pay women for 3 years after they give birth. We can't pay because we're covering your defense costs. Trump said, we can't keep doing this. We had a lot of money before, but now we're in debt. Come on, you should help too. How dare you? Then we won't protect you. Get lost. What do you mean you won't protect us? That's right, we just won't. And that's when they had to give in.